Good evening, and thank you for joining us for this episode of Our View, the show that brings the voice of poverty to the table. Joining us today is Dr. Jeff Ander, Council President for Trinity Lutheran Church, where Women's Co-op is housed, and of course, Mia Henry, our Work Experience Coordinator. Welcome, Jeff. So we're kicking off a series, and we're calling it Whose Responsibility Is It Anyway? Asking the question of, if there is poverty in our community, whose responsibility is it to solve that? Is it the individual who is in poverty? Is it the organizations that are supposed to lift them out of it? Is it our local and regional government who's setting the wrong policies? Whose responsibility is it? And so we asked you to join us because there's some interesting things around that going on at Trinity. It's not just a church anymore, right? Mm-hmm. And it never really was, because 20 years ago you welcomed Women's Co-op into the building.
Yes.
For us to have office space and a place for our membership to gather. Why did Trinity make that decision? I wish, we didn't pay you rent back then, so you can't say it's because we supported the church in any way. The church completely supported Co-op.
Well, and it was important because that was part of our mission. And as you know, the history of the Post Edition is rather interesting in terms of C.W. Post providing these homes for his factory workers and providing a standard of living for them that was rather unique and would help them to be able to support themselves. Unfortunately, that was 100 years ago or so. But as part of that, he also designated place for religious worship, and there were various churches in the Post Edition initially. And now I believe there are 3 worshiping communities that I know of. You may know more than I do. But Trinity has been a consistent part of that neighborhood over that period of time. I've been a member since 1980, and there's been lots of changes in the community and then in turn in terms of our church. But as the area tended to decline economically, and as you know, the quality of the homes declined in a lot of different areas. There's certainly many homes as you drive through the Post Edition. They're very well maintained, and people take a lot of pride in those. There are others, unfortunately, that are rental properties or those that have been on the decline. But so there was definitely a need for support for people within the Post Edition. So Trinity really took on that social justice ministry. And as you'll recall, our minister at the time, 20 years ago, had a conversation with you about the needs of you and your neighbors at Triangle Trailer Park. And you need to tell this story better than I. As I've said whenever I have an opportunity to, I'll tell you a brief story. I was traveling back from Hastings one night many years ago and had on public radio, and there was a show on there. I don't remember the name of it, but where you told a story.
Oh, yeah, it was the Dave Eddy show?
No, I think it was actually on National Public Radio where you told where people came in and told their stories, and you told the story about how Women's Co-op started and your kitchen table and the people that that you helped, and how that then needed a place to function, and that's how Trinity got involved. But that story, it just was amazing. By the time I got home from that, I had tears running down my face, and in the hearing what the needs were of you and your neighbors in that trailer park. And that's really, I think, what spurred Trinity as your neighbors together to offer that space. So we offered a space for you to begin Women's Co-op, and you took it from there in terms of developing a program that really addressed the needs of poverty in the Post Edition and well beyond that now. But it was really that partnership, and we had something we could give to you in terms of space and support, and that's been something that's been an important part of our mission over the last 20 years that you just celebrated. So it's a core part of our ministry. I would say the majority of our members are members because of that ministry and that partnership.
And we do have an amazing connection, right? Like in November, we will celebrate Under One Roof for the oh my gosh, 8th or 10th year, where everyone in the building comes together for a Thanksgiving meal to give thanks for that building and that space.
Correct.
Which is why I'm excited for some of the next chapters, because tell us about the decision that Trinity's made that the building is not just a church anymore. What will it be?
Well, it's an interesting transition when you look back over that 20 years, because 20 years ago, you folks had nothing in terms of how you were going to help one another, and we provided the facility for that. Looking 20 years later, there have been significant changes societally in terms of organized religion. Churches are shrinking in terms of people attending churches. Church buildings are closing, not only in our community, but nationwide.
Sure.
And so there's been a real transition where that's concerned. So I would say in some ways, you're helping Trinity as much as we probably helped you over the years, because the size of our congregation, like many in the area, has been smaller, and as a result of that, we don't need as much space. And so here we have this building that we've shared and cohabitated in for all this period of time. And what we've decided, many churches face this same dilemma, that they have more space than they need. And some churches end up closing, or a more creative solution that we came across was, how can we turn this building into not only a worshiping community, but also a community center? So we've applied for nonprofit status for the building as an entity in and of itself that will take over ownership of the building. Trinity will continue to be essentially a lessee within that building. We'll use our worship space and the other space we need. Trinity Co-op will continue to use a majority of the space in the building for your mission as well. And then Co-op, of course, has developed many community connections, and Trinity, I believe, has as well. So we have other community agencies coming in through the workforce development
We have
program.
the Kellogg Community College
Kellogg,
classes that
correct.
I act, which is beautiful. And then Trinity and Co-op together in partnership created the Children's Protective Service Visit Room.
Correct. DHS has been a program.
So we've
Michigan
brought more
Rehabilitation.
programs to that space, and plans for the future. There is a big discussion in a committee forming to bring small homes to that
Correct.
property.
Correct.
So we're
they,
very excited about that.
Right. So we'll look for other community partners to come in addition to Trinity and Co-op and those others that you mentioned, and look forward to that being an even busier space than it already is with Co-op, but serving the needs of those in the area.
Yeah, because we serve in a variety of ways. I mean, we're a voting poll, so people vote in our building. We've done food distribution over the years. There is a couple churches who donate turkeys to the neighborhood, and they're all dispersed in November from Trinity. So there are a lot. We have a diaper bank now, an active diaper bank under, I think that's under Community Action Agency, but I might be misquoting that.
It is.
Is it? Okay, great. Mia knows the things. I know enough just to be dangerous now. They took me and put me in a corner cubicle in the back, and they just say smile and nod your head, and I go, okay.
So, but to follow up on that, I think our building, Trinity, where you are housed and we are, is really a safe place for many people.
Absolutely.
It's a place to
It's a
come
home.
to have their needs met that aren't met in other ways, and that's really the intention, and that's our goal, to look at other ways we can even expand those services for people and make the best use of our building and in what we see as our social justice ministry, and I think that you do as well.
Absolutely. We have the gardens out back, and there are a couple different local community groups that are using garden space every year.
There are this past year we had the Congolese used a portion of that, and they are now worshiping in our community.
Yeah, how exciting
on
is
Sundays, so
that?
we're sharing that with them as
The
well.
sanctuary space. That is really cool.
Just listening to this, it sounds like Trinity has come full circle with what churches were meant to be in the first place. I feel like it wasn't just meant to be a place of worship, but a place of community, a place where you go if you need your family, if you need resources. So it just sounds like that this trend, if other churches go this direction, is nothing but a positive thing, in my opinion.
It is.
Well, the pastor of our church, Trinity, has said that every 500 years the church reforms on some level, and we're at that 500-year juncture. So maybe that is
Prophetic. Yep.
I'm really proud of that building and space, just because if you look at the makeup of that neighborhood, there isn't a lot there
No.
for that community anymore.
No.
There's no grocery store. There's not a school that Post Edition can own anymore. There's not a library. Well, I mean, there never was a library in the neighborhood, but these are the things that,
Sure.
give you foundation in the neighborhood, and I don't really feel like we have that. And I believe that Women's Co-op in Trinity is one of those foundations. And we're not the only one. You mentioned there are a couple other ministries. Kingdom Builders does some amazing
Right.
work just down the street from us. And St. Mark's ME is down in the neighborhood,
Correct.
and they do some amazing work too.
Sure.
So definitely not saying we're the only ones, but I'm proud of the things that we're bringing, and I'm proud that we are looking from a social justice perspective. Right now, housing is an issue for folks. And if we can give them a place to incubate and figure that out through a small home program on our property, why wouldn't we do that?
Exactly. And that's another, the resource we had initially was to share our building. We have some property on Columbia Avenue, between our building and Columbia Avenue that is really gone unused. And as a congregation, we've talked about how can we use that better. And then Teresa had this idea of the tiny homes, and I think there's a growing interest in that. I know Washington Heights is working on a similar program, and so we're excited about that. And I think there's a footprint there that would allow us to put in a community of tiny homes that could be used in conjunction with co-op to help people to have an initial place to really focus on ending homelessness, give them a leg up in terms of getting involved in employment and then being more self-sustaining.
If someone did have interest, somebody out there listening would have interest in having space in our building to bring a local program closer to Post where they can access it, how would they contact you or get involved?
Well, I'm sure if they contacted you, you'd send them to me.
We would.
Which we would appreciate. Yeah, just contacting Trinity Lutheran Church, tlcbattlecreek.org is our website, and we're easy to find on Columbia Avenue there. So I know myself and Pastor Shearston would be happy to talk with anyone about that.
And then we do have a very kind of robust website that gives a lot of information about different things we're involved in. And we are an affirming church.
Exactly.
And so there's a lot of information on there about that and about when worship times are. You mentioned that the Condoleezza community is now worshiping there on Sunday afternoons. And then once a month we have something that Mia cooks for. Tell us about that, Mia.
We have a church service in the evening around 5:30 p.m. We call it Fed, and we just basically come together for a small worship service and then dinner afterwards. And invite the community, anyone who wants to come. It's always intimate, it's always nice, and the food is always good.
It is. And to relate back to your original question about poverty, and I think maybe we'll get into this in terms of the various dimensions of that, but spirituality, I think, is an issue that can be a challenge for people. And what we found in this partnership with Co-op over time is that Trinity Lutheran Church is a member of the Evangelical Lutheran Church, and I think we're pretty liberal in terms of our view of things, but yet we have a set worship service that we follow, just like many of the mainstream Protestant
It goes
religions.
something like this.
With a lot of singing in between, right? And what we found, and I know co-op members have come and kind of tried it out and so forth, but for many of them, I think in terms of their background and culturally, it just wasn't a comfortable fit. And so Teresa has talked for quite some time about we need something different that people would be more comfortable with, and that's how this Fed program service came about, which is much more non-traditional. It doesn't have the traditional Lutheran hymns and even scriptures, but it focuses more on discussions of spirituality. And it's just been amazing, the reception for that, and the people that I think have found that meaningful for them. So we at Trinity see that as really another way to deliver Christ's message, but and to do it
And
in
the
a way
social
that's
justice
comfortable,
side of
as
that.
well as that. Yes.
And I think co-op sees it that way because we understand that poverty is not always about how much money you have. It's the available resources
True.
that you have, and we see spirituality in your church as one of those resources.
Correct.
And you're right; they can't always access it, and sometimes it's just for reasons like it's Sunday and that's my only day off, and I'm not getting up and going to be somewhere at 10:30. But it's for a lot of different reasons. For me, it was difficult and challenging. I didn't have a church when co-op moved in, and so I chose Trinity. But I didn't understand any of the traditions. I mean, I'm just a bold person and would just go to pastor all the time and say, why do we do that? But for some folk, I mean, you can feel kind of out of place, right? Like everybody else knows what to do when the pastor does this.
Yeah.
But if you don't know that, or you don't know, the prayers or the things that we recite the creed every week, that can become uncomfortable for you, and you can feel like you don't fit. Where Fed
Yeah.
is kind of like,
Takes that anxiety
it
away.
does, because it's kind of like religion 101. There's no wrong thing to say, and it isn't just the pastor delivering a message, although she does. We do have a message
Right.
behind every Fed, but everyone gets to share in the discussion and ask questions, make comments. I don't think I've walked away from a single one not feeling fed in those ways, because we used FED as an acronym, but
Yes.
fed through fellowship because we're all together, and community, fed through faith,
Exactly.
because we get the word, and fed with me is wonderful
Yes.
food. Last time was pretty fire too, by the way. So, yeah. So yeah, let's shift the discussion a little bit here and talk about this series we want to kick off and why co-op would even want to do it. So co-op has always looked at two things. We've always looked at how do we serve the individual family, but bigger than that, the way that you serve the individual family is to give voice to their plight, right? And get the community to shift in ways that can support this family's upward mobility out of poverty. And we've also learned after 20 years of doing this that there are policies that sometimes affect people, cliff benefits, there are things. And there are also organizations that with best intentions set out to solve different levels or facets of poverty, and it doesn't always go as planned. And so we've always done that twofold thing of engaging civically, and in fact, Trinity's social justice team kind of blended into our civic engagement team, and we work together on these issues.
Exactly.
So, moving the needle on things that are needed in the community. And so we're always asking the question of, why is this person facing these barriers, and where do we go in the community? Because co-op has never pretended to have all the answers,
Correct.
right? So we have some things, we have programs that can help you definitely economically to take strides forward or in educational endeavors. And we have supportive service programs, but we rely heavily on what is out there in the community, and do you qualify for that, and how do we make
Right.
that connection?
Yes.
And we have partners all across the community that help us do those things. So I think that it's, and after doing this show for a while now and talking about the different facets of poverty, we've done one film, documentary series on poverty. We're getting ready to launch a second one for 2025. And we're asking the question, like, whose responsibility is it anyway? Like, is it really the individual who just needs to pull up the bootstraps a little bit farther, or needs to work a little harder? Whose responsibility is it? And so after this month's show, for the next 12 months, we are going to bring our case managers on show with us, with one of our members that we're currently serving, to ask that question. Why specifically are you in poverty, and why can you not find upward mobility out of it? What do you think about poverty, just as a resident of Battle Creek, people living in poverty? Whose responsibility is it?
Well, I'll change hats too, because as a psychologist, it's obviously I deal with that from my own perspective, and you really should have a sociologist on here rather than a psychologist, because we tend to look at things from the individual's point of view, like you were saying, and also how people function in groups. But sociologists look at the more general, what are all the influences that cause people to be in certain circumstances. But so from my vocational background, as well as experience in being a resident of Battle Creek for about 50 years now, we use the term in psychology multifaceted. In other words, that the reason for poverty is undoubtedly a multifaceted kind of situation where there are many factors that contribute to that, both societally and then in terms of the individual. And so I think you're absolutely right. And the approach that you've taken is critical in terms of looking at what do we provide as a society, or what aren't we providing as a society to address poverty in our communities. And it's something that certainly we all would like to think that we live in a country that looks at those kinds of values, and there are many programs that you're well aware of and that people have put in place to try to address that, but nevertheless it remains. And so obviously there's not a single solution for that. But I think from a psychological standpoint, we tend to look at all the various factors that affect an individual that result in their being in a particular situation. And so obviously you have a person's individual background and what tools they had or did not have in terms of their background, both economically and in terms of family background and their ability to cope, as well as other kinds of deficits that come about as a result of being in poverty. So the social kind of network that I think we have in place always needs more attention. There's definitely areas that require more attention, and they never seem to be sufficient in terms of addressing needs that individuals have. From a psychological standpoint, though, and looking at the person as an individual, I think that there's some couple of concepts in psychology that have been popular in the last several years, and one of them is learned helplessness. In other words, that over time people, as a result of their experience, learn that they're helpless, that they don't feel like they have options in terms of what they're capable of doing. And in fact, it looks now like that may be a key component of depression, for example, that people who are depressed tend to have this perspective of helplessness and coping and being able to deal with their situation.
More on the scale that way instead of resiliency.
Correct, exactly. And I think what happens in poverty over time is that probably realistically people learn to feel helpless in their situation. And so as a result, they don't clearly look at options. And oftentimes, I think one of the issues with various programs is they're not even communicated to people. Your role is to make people aware of these, that you would hope they would, that as a society we'd be letting people know about, but you have to do that because it doesn't get publicized or people aren't aware of it. So as a result of that, you have this sense of learned helplessness. The other concept is what we call locus of control. In other words, where do you see the control in your life? Is it external or is it internal? And when you see it as external, in other words, that everything that happens to you or things that you impact your life are outside of you, you tend to again feel helpless in being able to cope with that. And I think once one is in poverty, there's that tendency to see things as all external. There's nothing I can do to impact my situation.
It absolutely is. I mean, we teach a class in resiliency, and one of the very first sections of resiliency is a whole module built around that locus of control because you have to learn that it is in your control. And it's across the board. Like, we've learned that poverty isn't just about the individual. Personally, I
Right.
feel that. It really is a collective, multifaceted issue. It is, the community understanding that every resident plays a role in poverty. At some level, you play a role in this and have a responsibility to it. And two, that yes, there are sometimes policies within our state systems that bring poverty relief that just doesn't fit. I get a job, I make $2 more, and you take away $125 in daycare benefits. Now I want to quit my job because I can't afford my daycare. Like, there are things like that externally. But you can really, if you choose to, as an individual, do something about all of those things.
Yeah, if you feel empowered, you absolutely can.
Right, because you can vote.
Yep.
You can vote for the right person.
Absolutely, the right policy.
You can write who you voted for and say, you just passed this bill and this doesn't work for families like me. You can be vocal to local systems the way that co-op is. If you do it in the right way. I don't suggest that you blow up standing at somebody's desk because
Right.
you didn't make the mark, but you can write local politicians. You can write the mayor. I know him personally. He's a great guy.
So it's feeling empowered at different levels.
Correct.
At every level you're on. Like us
Exactly.
feel empowered to write the mayor, and then the person that's actually in poverty feeling empowered to go seek out the program and seek out the help. And
But
I
I
think
think
it's-
that's one of the things that co-op does in its program kind of organically is that we teach people you do have control over this. Yes, it sucks right now, but if you take step A, B, and C, we guarantee you're going to end up at D. But we also give people the right to choose that, right? Like, Mia, share a story with us from someone who was one of our training candidates that worked for one of our local companies that we thought we were going to jump in and fix some things because he didn't have housing.
oh, yeah. So we had a young man that went to work for one of our outside contractors, and he was homeless. And he was sleeping outside of the site, the job site, and the job site couldn't have that. So they reached out to us, and we reached out to him, and we found him housing. We found him so many options and resources to combat the homelessness, but he just didn't want it. And he was so bothered by us trying to help him on that level that he kind of ran away from us. So,
Because every person has a right to choose.
yeah.
How they want to go about upward mobility, or, like for some of us, and we're going to have to wrap up because we're running out of time, but for some of us, we see that having this house, having this car, having the vacation fund put away, I've arrived. This is where I want to be. There's college funds for the kids, whatever it may be, and that's what we see is normal. That's what everyone,
Yes.
and we want that for everyone, right? But someone else might not see
want
this as their happiness. Maybe I don't want to own a home.
That was a huge eye-opener for me.
For me as well.
Giving people the right to choose their path and understanding that every path is not the same.
You have to respect
And
it.
honestly,
Yes.
that man that we're speaking of is the one who taught me that,
Yeah.
because
Me too.
I saw it as, hey, we're giving you these opportunities. We're going to do this for you. You just
It's
do it.
linear. Just do it.
Just do it.
Yeah.
And he was the one that pointed out of, hey, I don't like your path.
Back
And
off,
we were
lady.
like, wait, what? What do you mean? So we thank you so much for joining us
It's been a
today.
pleasure.
I am,
Thank you
as
for
a
all
member
your
of
work.
Trinity and a resident of Trinity's building, I am thrilled for the future of Trinity
Looking
Lutheran
forward
Church. I
to
think
it.
we're doing amazing work there. If you're out there and you're looking for a church or you're looking for something meaningful to belong, join us at 10:30 on Sunday morning for
Yes.
worship. You will get a swarm of people welcoming you because that's what we do. You can also join us the third Thursday of the month at 5:30 for Fed services, where Mia will bake amazing food for you to eat. Or Monday through Thursday from 8:30 to 4. Just pop in, see what we're doing, and have a conversation with someone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.